Many people said, I'm just a teacher. And that pissed me off because one, nobody is just a teacher. I was bored, I was doing the dishes, I thought, what can I do? And I obviously love podcasts already. I thought, well, I'm going to start a podcast. I was doing all these things well, looked like I was being successful, but I wasn't making much money for me and my family. 2023, I got time to have a think about things and really reflect. I believe that if you set a goal and you take action to achieve that goal, you will achieve it. My name's Neil Mackay, the podcast guy. So I've been in Vietnam now for 9 years, and I'm going to talk to you today about how I turned basically my hobby into a full-time business here in Vietnam. So I've been a massive podcast fan since they first came out. And looking around the room, many people here will know what an iPod is, right? You remember what an iPod is? Many people don't know that's how podcasts got their name. It's a broadcast on an iPod. So I used to listen to podcasts when I was going to university. I would download them at home, put them on the iPod, and then listen to it on the bus. So if anyone remembers the Ricky Gervais podcast, it was one of the first big ones, a few nods, the Ricky Gervais, Carl Pilkington, Stephen Merchant, millions of downloads. That was the first big podcast in 2002. And I used to sit on the bus laughing to myself like a madman listening to this podcast. And then fast forward to 2014. Has anyone listened to the Serial podcast? With Adnan Syed? That was the big boom in podcasting when podcasting went crazy. So my wife and I would actually sit on the couch together and listen to each episode as they came out week by week, which is quite unusual. Podcast is normally a personal thing, but that was like a big boom. You wanted to find out what was going to happen with Adnan Syed, and we'd talk about it with friends. And you can see 2014 was when podcasts really started to take off. Obviously now with the last election was called the podcast election, and now podcasts are more mainstream, but not as mainstream as you think. It's still relatively new and growing, especially here in Vietnam. So my wife and I, we came to Vietnam for a vacation in 2015. Like many people probably here, fell in love with the place instantly, wanted to come back. We came back in 2016 for 6 weeks, and 9 years later, we're still here. That's the way it goes, right? So around 2019, 2018, I actually went from teaching English to I got my dream job. So my background is in fundraising for not-for-profits and working for different charities in Australia and New Zealand. And I was lucky enough to get a job here for the ILA Community Network, which was the charity division for the school, ILA, which many of you would have heard. And we were helping give underprivileged children access to education, not just learning English, but education in general. And the highlight of that for me was we raised $60,000 in my first year, and we built a new school in the Mekong Delta in Cha Vinh. So that was an incredible achievement for me. Then around about the same time, my wife and I, our schedules changed. We're joined at the hip, so we're always together, but our schedules changed. And I had Sundays to myself, and I was getting a bit bored. As many of you know, one thing to do in Saigon is go out drinking, and I didn't want to go out drinking all day without my wife, and then she came home from work and I was already hammered, so I had to entertain myself. And I was bored, I was doing the dishes, I thought, what can I do? And I obviously love podcasts already. I thought, well, I'm going to start a podcast. And I wanted to know more about people that lived in Saigon, because one of the things I'd noticed in my short time here was when you ask somebody what did they do for a job, many people said, I'm just a teacher. And that pissed me off because one, nobody is just a teacher. It's an incredible job, highly skilled, makes a massive difference. But also many people I met had more to them than just a teacher. They had a career as a musician in a band. They had a background in finance, design. They had so many things going on, and I wanted to know more about those stories and then share them with people as well so we can get beyond the just a teacher, because many people were more than that. And I wanted to know more about Saigon as well. So I thought, okay, I'll start a podcast. What will I call it? And one day I'd read an article in VN Express that said there was 7.4 million motorbikes in Saigon for only 9 million people. Which is, you're not really surprised about it when you look out the window, right? But it's still an incredible fact. And actually Vietnam has the highest amount of bikes per people in the world, which again is not surprising. So I thought that was a fun, quirky name, 7 million bikes, a Saigon podcast. So that was the full name when I first started, was 7 million bikes, a Saigon podcast. And I started to interview people at home with just one microphone that sat between us. My dog would often lie next to us, and if you listen to some of the early episodes, you can hear her snoring in the background. Some people enjoyed that more than listening to me, but I started talking to different people and learning lots and lots about podcasts. I knew nothing at the time, absolutely nothing. I had to learn everything from scratch, and I just had one microphone. I used GarageBand, which was free on my 2010 MacBook Pro at the time. I had to figure out how do you publish episodes, how do you promote it, how do you get it out there, everything. But to my surprise, it actually was quite successful. So I launched the first episode. I thought maybe 15 people would listen to it, mostly my friends out of pity. But it actually did really well. We had, I think, 150 listens in the first few days. And it just stayed consistent at that level, and we were getting more and more publicity. It was getting more and more well known for having a podcast in Vietnam. So it was quite incredible, and we've now gotten to the stage where the name has changed a couple of times. It went from 7 Million Bikes, a Saigon podcast, to then as COVID hit and lockdown happened, we were doing more and more interviews online. I was talking to people around the world about Vietnam. It became a Vietnam podcast. And then now we've changed the name just a couple of weeks ago to Discover Vietnam, a Vietnam podcast. And during that process, I found out recently we're in the top 5% of podcasts worldwide, which is incredible. And we just surpassed 100,000 downloads as well, which I know for some people you might think that doesn't sound like much because you hear like the numbers millions of downloads and things like this. But in the podcasting world, 100,000 downloads is absolutely massive, especially for a little small podcast with no marketing budget in Vietnam. So it's pretty incredible. So that was how I started on this journey of podcasting. And then what happened was 2020, as you know, with COVID hit, I was another COVID casualty. So I was doing my dream job, helping give education to underprivileged children. But as the borders closed and the school couldn't bring any more teachers in, they asked me to start teaching and do less of my job, which of course I was happy to do. It was a massive crisis. And so I was teaching more and more, doing less and less of my actual job, which was difficult to do anyway because we couldn't really do much because of what was happening. And so over that year, over 2020, it became quite apparent to me that things weren't going well. And my contract was up for renewal at the end of the year, and I kept pressing them, what's going to happen, what's going to happen. Eventually they came back to me and said, yeah, we're not going to renew your contract. And so I had to make a choice. What was I going to do? So I could be a manager of an English department. Didn't really want to do that. A lot of work, a lot of stress, not really my passion. I could become a full-time teacher or a part-time teacher. So I said, okay, nothing. But I said, okay, I'll be a part-time teacher. And I'm going to go full-time with what I had now called 7 Million Bikes. So 7 Million Bikes was the umbrella company. And during this time as well, I actually had started doing stand-up comedy. I don't know, has anyone seen me do stand-up comedy here? So I was a comedian, I was running quiz nights, I was even starting to run music nights, I was doing a lot of entertainment and the podcast as well. So 7 Million Bikes became the company that did all of this entertainment. I'm going to make an entertainment brand in Vietnam. I'm going to do all this amazing stuff. I'm going to teach part-time. And so that was going pretty well. I was doing lots of shows. The best one we ever did was at the Hard Rock Cafe, which is no longer here, but we had over 150 people in the Hard Rock Cafe. We were doing shows every single week. I was touring all over Vietnam. I got to go to Thailand, even New Zealand, Scotland. I did a show in America as well. It was absolutely incredible. But then, as you know, 2021 happened. So 2020 was pretty good in Vietnam. If you were here, you know, we lived the life of Riley. The rest of the world was burning to the ground, and in Vietnam the borders were closed and we were all going out and having a great time. And I was building things in Vietnam. It was going really, really well. Doing a bit of podcasting. I was starting to work with some businesses, helping them get their podcast up and running. I was hosting some podcasts as well. But mainly we were focusing on doing the events. And right before, so it was May 2021, I was approached by a massive school in District 7 about working with them. And one of the questions I asked them was, do you need a red invoice? And I'm sure many people here know what a red invoice is. Do you need a red invoice? Which they did. So I was like, shit, okay, I've got to register the company now. Because up until this point, we weren't a registered company because I didn't need to be. So I was about to sign the biggest contract of my life. I was going to help them with their events. I was actually going to help them with community work as well, based on my charity background, all under 7 Million Bikes. It was so exciting. Then 2021, the lockdown happened, right? So I paid, I think it was like 40 or 50 million to register the business. Then all the government offices closed. All the schools went online. Everything went online. All my events stopped. Couldn't do any more comedy shows, couldn't do any more quiz nights. Everything went online. And so I thought this was going to be, as we probably all did, like a short-term thing, right? It's going to be fine. We're going to be open in a few weeks. This has happened before, but we all remember it went on and on and on. And so at first, like many people, I did nothing. I was enjoying myself, having espresso martinis for morning coffee, things like that. And then I was like, okay, now I've got to do something. So I started to do more and more online events. We actually did some really, really successful online comedy shows, which at first I thought would be horrible. It was actually really fun. We had about 40, 50 people on an online Zoom watching comedy. I had some comedians from around the world come in and do shows. We did quiz nights every week. It ended up being a really amazing period where we're doing lots and lots of cool things online. And I was even starting to get hired by businesses to run events for their staff because their staff were at home bored, obviously. And then, thankfully, everything opened up overnight for anyone who was here. I think it was the end of September, around then. Everything opened up overnight and I lost all of my online events that I was starting to get paid for. Nobody wanted to be online anymore. And nobody wanted to be offline either because nobody wanted to gather still. It was still COVID around. Nobody wanted to go hang out. All the comedians who were based in Saigon, most of them had left during this time. The audience had left. It was all gone. So I lost my offline events and my online events all at the same time. So I had to figure out what I was going to do. So going into 2022, was still hard. We were trying to get events going, trying to make things happen, but everything was closed, everything was still quiet, nothing was really happening. And during 2022, I became what I would call a yes man. I was just saying yes to everything because I was just trying to survive. At one point, I counted I had 8 different jobs at one time, or 8 different gigs, and I was just running from one thing to the next, absolutely exhausted. I was doing my quiz nights. I was teaching in the morning. I was teaching in public school out in Tuduk, so I'd have to drive out there. They would ask me, do you want to do an extra class? Sure, I'll do an extra class. Suddenly that's another 2, 3, 4 hours gone from my week. At the same time, I've got it in my head, I'm going to build my podcast business, but I'm getting distracted by all these other things. I'm trying to do a comedy show, which takes about 10 hours to prepare a comedy show because I was organizing them, not just doing them on stage. So just saying yes to everything. I mean, I even was doing TikTok videos. I know what you're laughing, right? Because I agreed to do a voiceover job, which came through podcasting. And then the guy called me up and he's like, well, can you do TikTok videos? I said yes to everything. I was like, yeah, sure, I can do TikTok videos. So sure enough, me and my dog are running about my apartment, filming ourselves doing TikTok videos. I even did pharmaceutical marketing, which is where I met Blake. Thank you for inviting me. That's how it's led me today. But we were both doing pharmaceutical marketing. I was actually making a podcast for that company. That's how I got involved with them. So I was starting to do a little bit of podcasting, but I was too busy saying yes to everything else. So 2022 was, it looked like I was being successful. People would tell me that, oh, you're doing so well, you're doing so amazing, you're doing so many things. But to me, I wasn't being successful because I wasn't good at anything. I was doing a lot of things, but not really doing them well. And I'll be perfectly honest, I wasn't making much money. And ultimately that is the measure of success. We can all be fancy and say, oh no, it's all about doing what you love, but it's about money, right? We all want to make money at what we do. And I was doing all these things well, looked like I was being successful, but I wasn't making much money for me and my family. So 2023, we went back to America where my wife is from. I got time to have a think about things and really reflect. Because 2022, I've been working really hard on everything, even the podcasting. I'd created an online podcast course because I read one of those blogs that's like, create an online course, you'll make so much money. So I spent 3 months recording myself, writing the PDFs, doing everything. I sold 2 of them for like $10 each. So nothing was really working out. So we went to America and I was able to have some time to reflect. And I thought, okay, what do I do? And I realized that the big piece of advice that you always hear, you always read about, is you have to start saying no to things. And I realized I'm doing too much. I need to focus on one thing and do one thing really well. and start saying no to everything else. To be honest, I never wanted to be a famous comedian. I did it because I loved it. So I don't want to be a famous comedian. It's not like a good career. I can't see myself making much money out of it. I don't want to be a teacher. I don't want to make TikTok videos. I don't want to do pharmaceutical marketing, even though it was cool. I want to do podcasts. This is what I said I was going to do after I lost my job. I was going to make podcasts and make a podcast business. And all these other things that I'm saying yes to are distracting from that, so I have no time in my week to actually dedicate that. Things are moving so slowly. I'm picking up 1 or 2 clients every few months, just trying to survive. Time's going by so quickly. I need to just focus on one thing. And so I decided I'm going to focus on podcast production agency. Not my own podcast, because it's really difficult to monetize from your own show. That was another decision I made. So I'm not going to focus on now Discover Vietnam. I'm going to focus on making podcasts for other people, because I love doing that and I've learned so much. And again, a lot of people in here will relate to this. My wife is amazing, and it was her that was like, you've learned a lot, you need to use these skills. And I do have to thank her for saying that. She was like, you need to use your skills to help other people. So I decided on that trip back to America, I'm going to focus on one thing and one thing only, and I'm going to try and do it my best. And I'm going to make 7 Million Bikes podcasts. Because the name was unclear for me, the name was a fun, quirky name, 7 Million Bikes. But I was getting messages from people saying, do you rent out motorbikes? So I was like, okay, I need to make this clear. So I added the podcast to the name. So the business became 7 Million Bikes Podcast. And I still get asked to this day, why is it called that? And I do like sharing that story. Some people figure it out, some people are not too clear. But I created 7 Million Bikes Podcast, and I wound back everything else I was doing. So I stopped making TikTok videos. I slowly wound back on all my comedy shows, and by April I've stopped doing comedy, which I haven't done it since. I didn't do any more pharmaceutical marketing. I quit my teaching job. I said I'm going to focus on one thing, and the difference was instantaneous. Now I'm a little bit of a believer in things like the law of attraction, things like this. You know, I'm esoterically, you're nodding your head. I believe that if you set a goal and you take action to achieve that goal, you will achieve it. Whether it's law of attraction or whatever it is in the world, it will come to you. And as soon as I made that decision to focus on podcasts only, I got a phone call like the next week from somebody that I'd applied to months ago to help with their podcast production company. I'd forgotten I'd been in touch with them. He said, hey, I loved your resume. Would you be open to working for some clients of mine and doing some editing? I was like, of course. So instantly started picking up clients, and as soon as I started scaling things back, stuff started happening. So by the middle of the year, I hired my first editor as well to help me with the editing. And instantly I was like, I don't want to be doing this myself. I want to build a business. And I'd never set a goal for this business or for any of this venture before because of COVID. As many of you will relate, you didn't know what was going to happen from one day to the next. You didn't know where you were going to get food from. So I never set a goal. I knew goal setting worked, but I was just like, I'm just going to do this and we'll see what happens. And nothing really happened. But finally I was like, I'm going to set some goals. And I decided that by 2029, I want to be the #1 podcast production company in the world, not just Vietnam. And I want to have $1 million turnover and 20 staff, starting with just me and no turnover. So 2023, we started to build up. We got more and more clients. I started to hire a couple of staff members. It was really, really exciting. And then 2024 went to the next level. So 2024, we were still building up. We were getting more clients. I was able to hire on some more staff as well. Things were going really well. The website was getting built up, working on my LinkedIn. Still saying no to things. I was getting approached all the time. It really did make a difference. People would message me, say, hey, can you come and do a quiz night? I know you guys, some of you have done my quiz nights before. They would say, can you come and do a quiz night? I would say, nope, I can't do it. And I know that 2 years earlier, I would have said yes to that. I'd have been like, yeah, no problem, let's do it. And then that would have been 4 hours out of my week away from my main passion. So I started to say no to things, and I was focusing on what I needed to do to make the business successful. And 2024 was absolutely incredible. We signed our biggest client ever. We worked with RMIT Vietnam, and we worked on their podcast to celebrate 25 years in Vietnam, which I'm just going to show you here. If I can get this to work, hold on. So we worked with RMIT Vietnam to do a podcast in London, Paris, Barcelona, and back here in Saigon as well, which was the biggest project we've ever worked on and the proudest thing that we've ever done. So this was the biggest project we'd ever done. When I first met with RMIT and they said, we're going to do a podcast in London, Paris, and Barcelona, my eyes lit up. I was like, oh my God, they're going to send me to all these places. Then they told me the budget and I was like, okay, it's not going to send me to all these places. But thankfully what we could do and what I knew we could do, we could book all those studios in these cities. Every major city in the world, you just type in podcast studio and you'll find hundreds of them. And so I went through them and found the ones with the best aesthetic, the ones I liked. And then the alumni and the students were already in these cities. They could just go and record. We could get the files from the studio and we produced these podcasts. And they now have, I just looked today, each episode has over 10,000 views, which is incredible. So 2024 was amazing. Not only that, we won some major awards. Can I go back? So I applied for the Asia Podcast Awards, and I couldn't believe it. Not only did we win one award, we won 2 awards. We won Best Podcast, Best Interview Podcast in all of Asia with a Vietnam podcast. But even more importantly to me was I won Best Producer in Asia for not just, thank you very much. Not just for this podcast, but for all the podcasts that we worked on, because I had to submit a sample from all of these podcasts. And that to me was the biggest thing. I remember I pretty much almost collapsed when I found out that we'd won these awards. It was just incredible, real validation of what we did. And then on top of that as well, at the BritCham Gala Awards, we won Great Company, Best Company in the SME category as well, for the work that we've done with podcasts in Vietnam, because we do actually produce, I think the last count was over 9 podcasts. So we've done the Delta MV one about pharmaceutical marketing. We've worked with Fidenum about foreign direct investment. We do the BritCham podcast as well about how to do business in Vietnam. And obviously with my own podcast as well, and a couple other I'm blanking on right now. So one of the most exciting things is being able to showcase this amazing country to the world, and to be able to be awarded for it. It was incredible. So then, moving into 2025, we had big goals. I wanted to double our income, double our staff. I wanted to do even bigger projects, sign bigger deals, work with bigger companies. I was so excited for this year. And then, as you know, things have a habit of just kicking you out. January came around, we lost our biggest client. We didn't get any more. Other clients couldn't pay, and we had our worst month on record ever. I think we barely made $1,000 that month. So things were tough, and it got worse. So in February, I started getting really bad dizziness to the point where I couldn't go outside because I was so dizzy. And I'd had it before in my life, but it had kind of gone away and it had never been a big problem. But this time it was really bad. I couldn't even walk the dog. Anytime I was outside, it just felt horrible. So I went to the doctors and they gave me vertigo medication. Took it, nothing happened. Went back again. Different medication, took it, nothing happened. So I went back a third time. This time he referred me to a neurologist at VinMec. And so I went to the neurologist. I got booked in for an MRI that day. And I'm pretty easygoing and funny and things like this. So I remember taking a picture in my gown and sending a selfie to my friend group. They're like, haha, I'm going for an MRI. Went for the MRI and met with the doctor afterwards, and she sat me down and she looked pretty serious. It was pretty scary. She said, we found some lesions on your brain and we need you to come back in tomorrow for another MRI to figure out exactly what it is. So I pushed her. I said, what does that mean exactly? And you could tell she didn't really want to tell me because I was by myself, but I said, you need to tell me what's happening. She said, well, 2 things. One, it could be MS and we need to figure out from the MRI. The other thing, it could be brain cancer. And I was like, right, what does that mean? She said, well, if it is brain cancer, you have about 4 months to live. Yeah. That was over 4 months ago. I'm still here, so don't worry. All right, thank God it wasn't brain cancer. I went in for that MRI, and I've never prayed for MS so much in all my life. I was in that machine please be MS, please be MS, please be MS. So sure enough, I got diagnosed with MS, multiple sclerosis, for those who don't know what that is. And it explained a lot of symptoms. I've had a lot of kind of maladies over the years that don't really affect me too badly, but then when you put them all together, you're like, oh, this makes sense. So thankfully, Vietnam is an incredible country if you have access to the right healthcare. And I do have to couch that. I know that not everyone has access to amazing healthcare. Luckily, I do. I got treated with the MRI right away, went back in for another test. I got diagnosed with MS, and I luckily got put on basically a new wonder drug, one of the best treatments available. It's called cladribine, if anyone has heard of it or in the industry. And that was incredible. So I spent 5 days in the hospital, had to take the drug every day, working on that project for RMIT. If anyone works for RMIT, they don't know I was working on that project from my hospital bed, but I finished that from hospital. Did 5 days, then I had to go back in another month, did another 5 days to finish the treatment. I went back for an MRI just a couple of weeks ago, and luckily there's no new lesions and they're all getting reduced. So the treatment seems to be working, and I actually feel really healthy. A couple of small changes in my life. The biggest one is alcohol. Can't really drink as much as I used to. No more day drinking for me, unfortunately. As a Scotsman, that hurts, but I'll survive. It's okay, it's not too bad. But one of the things when I was in the hospital bed and I had a lot of time on my hands, and as I mentioned, we didn't have much business. Business wasn't going so well. I said, I really wanted to open up a podcast studio. I get approached about it every now and again, and I've always been put off because in my mind it was going to cost $20,000. I don't even know where I got that number from. Just in my mind it was going to be $20,000, and I didn't have $20,000. But I thought, okay, let's plan it out. So I wrote down line by line every piece of equipment that I would need to open up a studio. How much was it going to cost? And it turned out it was much less than I thought. Still a lot. I think it was about $6,000 just in equipment alone, but less than I thought than the $20,000. And so I thought, okay, let's do this then. So when I got out of hospital, I had a lot of time on my hands because, as I mentioned, we didn't have much business. And I started looking at different offices around the city, and I had no idea where I wanted to go. I know, not D7, sorry anyone from D7, but I knew I didn't want to go to D7. But I don't know if it was Bintan, Tao Dien, D1, maybe on the outskirts of D4, I didn't know. I went and looked all over. I had a really strict criteria. One of them was that I checked the toilets everywhere to make sure there was no shampoo or conditioner or toothpaste, to make sure that nobody was using the toilet as a bathroom, basically. So I was always checking that. I wanted someone that was quiet. That's quite difficult in Saigon, as you can imagine. I would be going into places and tapping the walls and listening to next door. A lot of places are lots of glass, which you can't use as a podcast studio. So it was quite difficult, but I was checking all the time. I was using my time wisely to figure it out. And then one day, my wife sent me a message, a screenshot, and she went, hey, I know this is probably not best, but somebody's just posted this apartment that's for rent, and I think it would be really cool as a studio. My first reaction was like, nah, no way, how are we going to use an apartment as a studio? But I was like, all right, well, I'll message them. So I messaged, said, can I come and see it? So that day we went to go look at it, and I was driving down the Mai Highway, and I was thinking, I might just cancel this. I might just message them. That's stupid. Why am I going to go look at an apartment? We're going to get a podcast studio. But I was like, all right, I'll just go anyway. I booked the time. We'll go. So we went and checked it out. And it was down this hem. Does anyone know where the State Bank is? Right on Pasteur Street, near the canal, near the Pasteur Bridge. Right down a dirty hem down there. We went down, went up these stairs, and I was like, this is awful. It's terrible. We're never going to use this. Walked through the apartment. It was nice, but I was like, why are we even here? And then, I don't know, something clicked. I was like, I think this can work, actually. I can see this. And so through a bit of back and forth with the landlord, because it is an apartment, but we told him, look, we want to make podcasts here. And I thought at any moment somebody's going to come along, pay the deposit for an apartment, and they'll tell us that, we can't have it, which I expected. But I was like, I really want this place. And thankfully we got it, and we moved in on June 25th. And as I mentioned in the beginning, I knew nothing about podcasts when I started. I knew nothing about podcast studios and equipment. ChatGPT was my friend. Literally everything. I was from cables to connections to video, everything. I was taking pictures, like, how do I fix this? What do I do with this? Troubleshooting everything. But I worked my butt off for about a month, and we got it set up and got it ready to start taking bookings. And I'm really happy to say it's only September now. We've been able to break even each month, which is no mean feat. I would like it to be better, but we've been able to break even on rent, which is very good, and starting to pay back some of those equipment costs as well. And then if you've seen Tay, who's here today helping me with the equipment, we were able to actually hire a studio assistant as well, and he's been incredible. He's been with us now for his first month and knows way more than me about setting up all that equipment. So since then, we've now started getting international clients coming in. We can do over 10 different setups. We can do a brick wall, we can do a curtain, we can do a white background. We can have a couch as well. We did our first podcast with children last week, which we'd never done before. That was really fun. It's just been absolutely incredible. And then not only that, as I said, since I've been in hospital, since my diagnosis, I wasn't able to do much work for a few months, and I could see that's why business wasn't going so well, because I wasn't able to get out there. I wasn't able to be my normal self looking for business. So over the last few months, we've been back to doing that. My LinkedIn has been growing. It's been really exciting seeing the hard work me and the team have put in over the last couple of years. Now on Google, if you Google like best podcast producer, apparently my name comes up or my company comes up, which is really exciting. So we've been able to get more business. And in the last 2 months, we've signed up 5 new clients and had our biggest ever months of income ever in the past 2 months, which has been incredible. And now the studio is growing as well. So all I would say is the biggest thing I've learned from this is choose one thing that you want to focus on. Start saying no to everything else politely. Make everything you do about that one thing, and I guarantee you will be successful. Thank you very much.